The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. I welcome you all to this webinar with the title, Making Sense from Common Sense. I will be delivering this webinar over the next 45 minutes, and I will definitely be giving some time, which usually is 50 minutes, to provide our audience, which I must say today is huge. There are a lot of people attending the webinar, which is fantastic, and the last 15 minutes will be allocated to questions so people can put forward their questions. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put on the next slide for you, so I'll give you 1 minute so you'd be able to read some instructions pertaining this webinar. While you do that, what I'd like to add is that the assumption we're doing in delivering this webinar, that there are people online attending who are familiar with agility, but we're also making the assumption that there are people who are not familiar with agility. So obviously, we'd be mixing and matching to make sure that effectively we will deliver value to our very diverse audience, which consists, as I said, of a huge number of people today. Okay, in terms of the webinar objectives, for the next 45 minutes, I will be looking at talking to you about what I'm calling the obituary. And there is a story, not a story, there is something I'd like to say there, where basically I would like to get you a bit to talk about your senses, about how you look at obituary. I'm going to talk about common sense, I'm going to talk about applying common sense, and obviously, as I said, time for questions and answers. With that said, the objectives for this morning are to enable you conduct an examination of conscious. Who is agile to you? And this is why and how I'm going to combine the obituary with that objective and that statement. I would like to ensure that we all are on the same page with the definition of the meaning of common sense. What does common sense mean? What is common sense? So we're going to look at a very, very simple example, and then I'm also maybe going to give you some time to think a bit about it yourselves as well, and then see how we're going to use common sense and apply it within an agile framework. For those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Ivan Bartolo, and effectively I've been with agility and involved with agility for the last 17 years. And as you can imagine, I've done mistakes. I have seen pros, I have seen cons of agility. But the net effect is that agile in today's world has become far more important. And the reason for that is that funding is all the time decreasing, quality is becoming far more demanding, and productivity is always and will always be of the essence. With those three parameters, one would always aim to reduce time to market in actually delivering business solutions. One of the main reasons is competition, supplier pressure, legislative pressures. There are a lot of reasons why we need to reduce time to market. So, to kick off, I have no doubt that everybody online, I have absolutely no doubt that everybody online knows who the gentleman is, Mr. Steve Jobs. And effectively, we all know that Steve Jobs has unfortunately passed away. We all know what he's achieved in his lifetime. And then there is another obituary here of a gentleman called Joseph Hoffman. Yeah? And the reality is that unless you really understand who Joseph Hoffman is and then you go into a lot of detail, these two obituaries, which one is on the left and one is on the right, would actually mean something different to us. Yeah? Now, going into a bit of more pragmatic situation, what I'd like you to consider is the following. When you read an obituary of somebody you don't know, example, you read an obituary of somebody called Joseph Smith who lives in Pennsylvania. What will it mean to you? Nothing, because you don't even know the individual. Yeah? Then you can actually go into a bit deeper. If the obituary gives you information about the age of Joseph Smith, and it says 18 years old, it will give you one feeling. If it says 98 years old, it will give you a different type of feeling. Okay? But that's the most an obituary of somebody you don't know you can actually relate to. On the other hand, if you read an obituary of somebody you know very well, a friend, somebody you've worked with, a colleague, if you know the individual, the feeling is completely different because you can relate to an episode with that individual. You can relate an experience with that individual. And the question I therefore have for you today is, when you talk of agile, are you using it as a buzzword or as something you really believe in? Or are you simply using the word agility to gain mileage? Are you using agility because it's the in thing? Because nowadays agility is being used in marketing, it's used in financial audits, it's used in software development. What does really agility mean to you? Is agility to you the obituary of Joseph Smith? Or agility to you is the obituary of somebody you've worked with, somebody you have an experience with? What is agile to you? Before you answer that question, I'd like to share a few things with you. So then I'm going to enable you, and I will give you a minute to do a self-reflection and examine your conscience so you as individuals will understand whether agility to you is Joseph Smith of Pennsylvania, or whether it is the colleague that up to last week you were sitting next to and have been working with for the last 10 years. And to do that, I'd like to share my next slide with you. And it is very important we all understand that if you look at what is above the line on this slide, if we look at what is above the line, and I'm just going to make sure that we all understand each other, so I'm going to... So, what is above the line? Here we have a process, we have people, we have a result. And the obituary example that I kicked off with is, if agility to you is Joseph Smith, that means that you are still here. You are simply thinking of agility as a process. If agility to you is something you experience, something you know it depends on you, something you know very well, and you are all the time thinking about it, you are there. And the reason I say that is because agility is about people. It's about your attitude, it's about your honesty. I'm all the time repeating these. But this is a fact. If you have the right attitude, if you are an honest individual, if your work ethic is correct, if you honestly care about delivering business benefits, if you don't pay lip service to common sense, which very soon we're going to talk about, whether you use agile as a process or a waterfall approach, all those ingredients are what effectively going to contribute towards the delivery of business benefit, which is what agile is all about. But the truth is, if you've attended an agile course, if you've been working within an agile organization, if the truth is you have all this experience within your organization, the reality is, when you are delivering, if I'm going to consider the philosophy, when you are delivering, are you honestly focused on the 80-20 philosophy? Are you honestly focusing on incremental delivery to deliver early business benefits? Is it part of your DNA, that philosophy, or is it Joseph Smith? If I look at the principles, you young men and women out there listening to this webinar, you are working on your projects today, at the moment, most probably you're looking at your email and listening to my voice. If you actually examined your project today, are you making everything possible to apply the principles? I'm just going to give you a few examples. Are you giving the opportunity to the users to be involved? Have you been empowered? And if you have not been empowered by your project manager, have you asked what empowerment is all about? Have you, in effect, spoke to them about it and said, why have not they empowered you to make any decisions? Are you focusing on frequency, on frequent delivery of products? Are you, in effect, discussing with your users and with the people who are in senior positions the quality acceptance criteria of what you are delivering? Is agility part of your DNA, or is it Joseph Smith? Because these are things you can change today on your projects. Practices. Are you time boxing? And if you're time boxing, is it a mere plan to get a tick in the box? Or is it a plan so you do your daily wash-ups every day? So you become accountable, you create visibility, you create a platform for communication. Are you prototyping? Are you enabling the business and giving them the opportunity to translate their business knowledge, their experience into a working model? Are you doing risk management? Project managers. Are you doing change control? This is all practices. I say it again. Is Agile part of your DNA, or is it Joseph Smith? Last but not least, products. This may sound like a hit below the belt, but do you have documentation? Is user documentation being done? Are those test scripts in place? Is the business case clear? Or are we paying lip service to agility? Those of you who have been to the training 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, 2 years ago, you have all listened to this and you have all concluded that this is common sense. The question is, are you applying it? Those of you who have never attended this training, my recommendation is do not attempt to go into an Agile framework unless you get the formal training. But if you're going to go for the formal training, make no mistake, it is not about you being trained to learn how the process works. You are going to attend the training, so the training will expose to you what are the things that you need to change to start applying common sense. With that said, I will move to my next slide. And I'm going to introduce these two famous words, yeah? Quick focus, the home of common sense. Now, a lot of people have a good laugh every day when they say common sense is not so common. I personally disagree with that statement 100%. I believe everybody is born with common sense. You know? If you look at a very young child who's very hungry, that young child applies common sense and starts shouting, screaming, crying. Why? To be fed. That is common sense. But common sense is not commonly applied. And what I'd like to do with you now is examine why common sense is not commonly applied. Look at these two people here. We have two hungry people. One who has lived in our world, the gentleman in a tie, and the one who's lived in a jungle. The thing in the middle is obviously a hot pepper. And we all know how hot hot pepper is. No matter how starving you are, you wouldn't go home, pick up a hot pepper, and literally start biting and eating on hot peppers, would you? Why? Because common sense has taught you that hot pepper is hot. And everybody knows how hot is hot for them. Because there are people that can't even bite a hot pepper. There are people that can probably have a bite of a hot pepper. And there are people who can potentially eat a complete hot pepper. But what has given you that knowledge is the experience of eating it. But the man who lived in the jungle, if we saw the man in the jungle literally bite on a hot pepper, who's never seen one before, we can't say common sense does not exist, because the man did not have the experience of what hot pepper is all about. But if I see the man in the jungle bite a hot pepper the first time, and he is in panic because of the heat within his own mouth, I can say, fine, he's gained the experience. But if I see him biting the second time, that means it's not that common sense is not so common, it means that he did not apply common sense. So those of you who have been trained, and even those who have not been trained and easily understand principle number 1 of agility. User involvement is imperative. Why must we involve the users? Because they bring quality to the development, they bring business knowledge. We want their involvement because we want their commitment, we want ownership, we want to improve communication. In the training, everybody says that this is common sense. So this is something we know. We are like the man in the red tie. We know what the red pepper tastes like. But then, after the training, on Monday morning, when we go back to our office, when we go back to our desk, we do the mistake of the jungle man. We bite, we eat the hot pepper the second time. Why? Because what we have actually replied to as being common sense during the training, something like, I repeat, user involvement, on Monday, we forget what user involvement is all about, and we don't involve them. We cease to remember what we said about commitment, about ownership. I'll be a bit more direct with those people who are technical on this webinar. Testing is integrated throughout the life cycle. Principle number 7. It is common sense. Why aren't you applying that common sense? Daily wash-ups are imperative because we increase communication. Where are the daily wash-ups being done every day? Are you doing them? Are you producing the documentation? So are you the individual like the jungle man? You just keep on biting on that hot pepper? Because to me, that doesn't mean you don't have common sense. To me, it means you are not applying it. And you may not be applying it because you are very, very comfortable in your comfort zone. Because you are an individual that may not be seizing, that may not be interested, rather than seizing, apologies, to take a journey from being good to becoming great. So, who are you? Who is Agile to you? I'm going to remind you in my next slide how to honestly apply common sense. Let's talk a bit more on how we should apply common sense. And after the last slide, we will go to some questions. Okay. The philosophy in Agile is all about, the 80-20 Pareto principle. I have no doubt that many people that read at least something about agility are very much aware about that. But what does it mean? Lately, I had a paper which came to me, an email, and asked me a very simple question. But does agility really deliver quality? Does agility really deliver reduced cost? A lot of people, unfortunately, have a misconception about cost and agile. They believe that cost is reduced because quality is reduced, or because we're prioritizing and we only deliver what is a must, or because we basically short-circuit the development. Which, in other words, a lot of people still try to label agility as a hacker's paradise. Ladies and gentlemen, it is surely not the case. If one applied the philosophy, if one applied common sense, effectively what the philosophy is about, that once you understand the business problem and you quantify the business problem in pounds, shillings and pence, and you understand the business objectives, and you are clear on what are the benefits that are trying to be achieved, against that you will always have a requirements catalog of business requirements. The key is here. What Agile is asking us to do, what common sense deems from us, what applied common sense is all about, is to map these business requirements with these benefits, so we will find out which 20% of these will deliver 80% of that. Which 20% requirements will deliver 80% of the benefits. And the moment we find out if a project is a one-year project, rather than spending 1 year to deliver, we must decompose the project into increments. So in our first drop, after 3 months, 3 to 6 months, we in effect deliver these 20% here. 20% requirements, which will give us the 80% benefit. That is agility. That is how cost is reduced. Why? Because at this stage, bear with me, at this stage, here, you are able to make a conscious decision. Should I continue to develop the other 80% requirements to achieve another 20% benefit? If by this time you have consumed 25% of your time and your budget, should you spend 75% on your budget, which is going to provide you with 20% of the business benefit? That is how you reduce cost using Agile. That is how you reduce time using Agile. I repeat, are you applying that common sense? Most of you out there, because I've seen some profiles of people that effectively booked to attend this webinar, may say, but I'm a developer, I am a user, I have no right, I do not have the empowerment to decide about all this. You may not have the empowerment, but you have common sense, and you have a moral obligation, if you have a positive attitude, to start asking your project managers, to start actually having conversations with senior people in management, and start bringing all this to fruition and put some light on it for them. Shed some light. Let's look at the principles and see how we actually apply them. The principles, I'm not going to make this a principles webinar, but the principles are about involvement, excuse my pen, which is not obeying as much as I would like, involvement, it is not providing me with the involvement, let me try again. This pen, let me change the pen please, apologies. I'm being told that the pens we have some technical problem. So, it is not an issue. The reality is that the principles are about involvement, they are about empowerment, they are about focus on frequent delivery, they are about an iterative and incremental process, they are about quality, they are about configuration management, and they are also about focusing and baselining requirements at a high level and about a collaborative and cooperative approach. At the moment, we have somebody who's trying to help out and typing it out. So while I talk, maybe we can actually put them all on the board. I will talk to you about involvement, while my colleague will actually write the word empowerment, which will be the next one. So involvement is about the involvement of users. Unless we're going to involve users, we cannot claim that we are applying common sense. We must involve users because those users will bring the business knowledge, will actually articulate the requirements better than anybody else because they have the business experience. We want to involve them because we need their ownership. We must involve them because we need their commitment. We must involve them because we need to effectively ensure that we are delivering to the business what actually the business needs. While I talk to you about empowerment, my colleague will talk about the word focus. We'll actually write the word focus. Empowerment. What is the empowerment issue? What are the empowerment issues? Unless teams are empowered to take decisions, then we're going to slow down the process. So in effect, if you want to really apply it in practice, what we need to do and what we need to ensure is that on one of the documents which is created during the definition phase, we actually, the document is called the project management document. Within that document, there must be what we call an empowerment strategy, where the empowerment boundaries are very well defined, which means what empowerment does a project manager have? What empowerment does a developer have? What empowerment does a user have? And you developers out there, you users out there, project managers, if you don't know what level of empowerment you have, if you want to apply agility in practice, you need to start asking these questions to whoever you need to ask them in your organizations. Because people may not have a problem with empowering you. They may be assuming that you are already empowered or that you feel empowered, or they are relying on your initiative. And initiative at times needs empowerment. While I talk on focus, the next word which we will write is quality. Focus on frequent delivery of product. The applicability of this is very, very simple. If you are simply going to focus on a date which is 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10 months away, you are never going to have the sense of urgency. If you want to be agile and the process cannot impose this on you, your attitude has to start here. If you want to be agile, make sure that you have a sense of urgency. How are you going to get a sense of urgency? By making yourself accountable. How do you make yourself accountable? By being part of a team and actually participating on a time box or within a time box. Why? Because on that time box plan, you will be doing those daily wash-ups, and you know that every day you've got to be with your colleagues. You need to be every day saying, what have you achieved up to yesterday? What is it you're going to achieve today? And what are the risks you have? What are the constraints you have? What are the assumptions you're doing? it will improve communication, it will make you accountable, it will create a sense of urgency. That's how you focus on frequent delivery of products. So don't come back and say, I've only attended a 3-day course and I still don't know how to time box. Yes, you may not know how to time box as yet to create the plan, but the question is, I don't really mind whether you know how to time box or not, because that is something we can teach you. The key is, has the training enabled you to understand that it is you who needs to instill within you the sense of urgency? Because the process won't do it for you. Are you applying common sense? I will not take much more time on the principles, but I will just mention the last one, quality. The lowest level of applying common sense in Agile is those developers out there, those project managers out there, those users out there, all of you out there, because you are in some kind of role. If you are a user, you must have the ability, and you do have the responsibility, that when you request something from somebody, you must tell them what is the quality acceptance criteria. You project manager, if you are out there and today, this afternoon, you're going to go in a room with your developers to actually secure some estimates, shame on you if you did not provide those developers with the quality acceptance criteria. How do you expect those developers to give you good estimates if the quality acceptance criteria has not been defined? And developers, if today you're going to be asked to give estimates and you don't have the quality acceptance criteria, don't bite the pepper again. It's hot. Ask for the quality acceptance criteria, so then you can start actually doing your estimates. So we all have a responsibility in applying common sense. We all have a responsibility to embrace these 9 principles if we want to apply common sense within our Agile framework. I'm going to move into practices. And to move into practices, what I will do, I must erase what we have done there. Thank you. I'm simply going to talk of workshops. I am simply going to discuss with you workshops, meetings. How many meetings have you attended in the last 1 month? How many meetings have you attended in the last 1 month where no agenda was in effect provided to you? An agenda has not been provided to you, and potentially you have still attended the workshop. If you want to apply common sense, from now onwards, you must start asking for an agenda. Why have you been invited to a workshop? Why have you been invited to that meeting? Or are you simply receiving an invite, and because it comes from your superior, you accept it because you have no way out? Or if it comes from a colleague you like, you accept it because it's a good moment to meet with them. Are you the type of individual who walks into a meeting because Microsoft Outlook from calendar has just reminded you that in 15 minutes from now you have a meeting? Are you that person? Because if you're that person, you're biting on that pepper again. If you want to apply common sense, when you receive that workshop agenda or that invite, make sure you have an agenda. Make sure you understand why you have been invited. Make sure that you understand what you have to prepare for that meeting. That is how you apply common sense. That is how you apply agility within your process. When you attend the workshop, who are you when you attend the workshop? After the workshop, when you receive an email from the workshop facilitator and you are given a document to review, do you honestly review it? Or are you still biting on that pepper? Another practice is prioritization. Must, should, could, would not. Are you prioritizing? And if things are not prioritized, are you asking for prioritization? If you're not asking for prioritization, do you think anybody's going to bother to prioritize for you? Because everybody would like to have everything done as a must, because everybody wants everything. And I repeat, I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to reflect on a statement. How many things do you have at home that you convince yourself you need them, or you convince yourself that you don't need them, but you still want them? How many things you have at home that you don't want? How many things you have at home that you want but you don't need? Projects are very, very similar. Are you prioritizing? Are you time boxing? Are you prototyping? Project managers, where are your risk logs? Are they on a server somewhere and nobody's seeing them? Or are they written on your hands and you're walking the floor every day, mitigating those business risks? What are you doing about change control? I move to products. And in products, I actually ask the first question. How many projects are you working on that in effect do not have a business case defined? How many projects are you working on that the conception report was not actually done? So if the conception report has not been done, and maybe the feasibility study report has not been done in the definition phase, how are you sure that you are delivering against the right business problem and not the wrong one? If you did not define the business objectives and the business benefits, how can you convince the customer, convince the user to prioritize the requirements against the benefits? If you don't have a requirements catalog and you don't have a prioritized requirements catalog, how can you do iterative and incremental delivery and time boxing? In other words, how are you going to increase productivity and how are you going to reduce costs? And how are you going to deliver early business benefits? The bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is very, very simple. Agile is a fantastic process. Agile works when the people using the process make it work. The people that make this process work are agile people. To be an agile individual, you need to be honest, you need to be out of your comfort zone, you need to be a hard-working individual, and you need to be a person where if you see no user involvement on a project, if you don't feel empowered on a project, if you're not focusing on frequent delivery, if quality is not defined, if iterative and incremental delivery is not being done, if testing is not integrated, if configuration management is not in place, if the stakeholders are not involved, if those are not in place, to you, it has to feel that you have read the obituary of somebody from your family, of somebody that you have been sitting next to for the last 10 years, a colleague. If on the other hand, if those things are not in place, and to you, that feeling is the same feeling of reading the obituary of Joseph Smith in Pennsylvania, then do not claim that you are an agile individual. What you're doing, you are effectively paying lip service to common sense. You are getting a tick in the box to keep yourself up to date with the buzzwords of the new era in IT. Thank you very much, and I will open the webinar for questions. Do we have any questions, please? We are going through a huge list of attendees at the moment, just to make sure that if anybody puts in a question, we'd be able to answer them. May I remind you, you can type a question, or you can raise your hand and talk. And obviously, if you basically write your question, we will not be stating your name. Any questions, please? Right, I'm going to give it a few seconds. There are no questions so far. I don't know whether, okay, we have a question. Okay, and effectively, do Agile and Prince work together or work well together? And so the question we have is, do Agile and Prince work well together? For those of you who are not familiar with Prince, Prince is a project management framework, is a project management method. The word Prince stands for Project in Control Environment. It was created by the UK government and it's currently used under the header of version 2. So Prince 2 is effectively a very, very, very broad method. To answer the question, do Agile and Prince work well together? First of all, academically, yes, they do. And in fact, if one had to do some search on the internet, there are a lot of white papers and a lot of papers where effectively they bring the two methods together, agility and Prince. The reality is that project management is part of Agile, and the project management within the Agile is all about the philosophy, the applicability and the involvement of the principles, and also the production of the documentation. So the reality and the answer is yes, they do work well together, and there are aspects of Prince which are and have already been embedded within Agile, and we do recommend that people look and see how they can work it together. But it depends a lot on organization culture, it depends a lot on the level of understanding of Prince and agility within the organization. But the answer is definitely yes, they can work well together, and there is no doubt that there have been projects that use both methods during the same time. We have another question, and the question is a whole essay, but I will read it with fun and I will enjoy it, no doubt. If you are desperate to get results, for example, having to bite a red pepper or otherwise you would die, wouldn't you bite even if you make sacrifice? You've got to be very careful, because if you're hungry and you're still going to buy that red pepper, it's still going to cause you ulcers, and it's still going to cause you probability you're still going to die with all the pain you have in your mouth. So there has to be always, the person who has asked this question, you always need to ask the question, what is the cost of doing it against the cost of not doing it? Yeah. So if I was desperately hungry, would I eat a red pepper? I think I would not, because I still know, that I am not in effect going to satisfy my hunger, and actually it's going to cause me more pain. It's going to cause me pains like ulcers, it's going to cause me pain in my mouth. In a project, if I need results, won't I use non-agile techniques, even at a sacrifice? The truth is, for the person who wrote that question, in agility there are no prescribed practices. Okay? So effectively, agility, to the contrary, it is encouraging us to use practices. So the answer is, use any technique which is going to work, but you've got to make sure that that technique is within the concept and within the context of the philosophy and within the context of the principles. And this is why it's important that at the foundation we understand and we embrace the philosophy and the principles. I hope that replies to your question. We have a question. Somebody's going to speak. You can speak. Adrian
Hello.
Archer.
Hi, Mr. Bartolo. So, actually, I'm not much into Agile. However, I'm currently willing to see different approaches, and I do. Agile actually has a lot of good principles that are applicable to anything. Again, common sense. If I want to explore Agile into something a curiosity and want to take it and start seeing it, where do I start?
Okay, we're going to switch off the volume, the sound again, and we'll answer. Okay, thank you for your question. I'm going to repeat the question for those who potentially did not hear it properly. The question was, if I wanted to start exploring agility, from where do I start? And if I understood well, because the sound wasn't 100% clear, is agility also just for development? First of all, as I said in the beginning of this webinar, agility, because of the philosophy I explained today and the principles, the reality, I use agility even when I'm planning a family holiday. And I'm going to give an example how. The reality is my children are stakeholders. Yeah? My children are stakeholders. Or actually, better still, I would say my wife is a stakeholder. The children are the users of that holiday. They are the people who are going to participate in the project. So I have a choice. I'm either going to just go away to the internet, book a family holiday without involving anybody, spend 5,000 euros, take them to somewhere for a holiday, and they will make the holiday terrible for me and themselves because they would not be interested in what I'm interested. They would not be interested in culture or in the museums and in arts because children would love to go to parks, beach, resorts. So the truth is, yes, we can apply agility in many ways, and there are the principles which we can apply in many ways, but to reply to the question, from where do I start? Obviously, our obvious response to that is going to be, the point of departure is QuickFocus.com. Go to QuickFocus.com, register, and for free, you will get access to professional mentor, the light version. Okay? But there is a lot of material on the websites. You can read about DSDM, you can read about SCRUM, you can read about XP. I would definitely recommend that you read the material on QuickFocus. There are lots of videos on QuickFocus. There is a case study. There are examples. There is a lot you can do. Obviously, last but not least, if you want to take agility as part of your career and your career development, my recommendation would be to definitely attend formal training in Agile. Okay. We have another two questions, and those are the last two I'm going to take in the interest of time. What are the key things you would advise people to avoid? Possibly obvious mistakes when adopting Agile initially. Well, the obvious mistake that people do is they basically think that for them to run an Agile project, they need the Agile process. What I'm trying to say, and what the whole concept and the whole reason of this webinar is, yes, you do need an Agile process, but more than anything else, you need the people to be Agile. So do not attempt to run an Agile process unless people have been trained. Do not attempt to run an Agile process unless you have the ability to measure the attitude and you know people's attitude. But also, there are other huge pitfalls. People do not take into consideration what in agility we call the suitability filter. Agile projects, like any other projects, they have what we call critical success factors and systems characteristics. So my question to that, the first obvious mistake that you need to avoid is, before you start that project and throughout the project, apply the suitability filter. Understand the shape of your project from a process point of view. If you want another pitfall to avoid, the obvious other thing, do not start the project unless you have clear objectives and clear business benefits. Always ask questions. Do you have the right skills employed? Do you have team stability? Have you got user involvement, engagement? Have you got the proper documentation, like the project management document? Does everybody on the team understand their roles and responsibilities? These are the common sense pitfalls, because this is all common sense and people don't apply it. Last question, how would you link empowerment with authority? Responsibility to use one's empowerment has to be accompanied by authority. Accompanied by accountability, of course, in order to be really effective. I am following this with a much broader view than an IT operation. Okay, first of all, empowerment and authority are two very, very, very distinct areas, okay? Because people may have the authority to empower somebody, okay? So people need to have the authority to empower others. And the truth is, usually, it is the people who have the authority that have a problem with empowerment, because the moment they empower somebody, they feel that they're going to lose their authority. But in effect, the more you are empowering, the more authoritative you are. Okay? And for those of you who want to have a very good example of this, I suggest to you to watch the movie called Schindler's List. There is a part in that movie where one of the German top-end brass goes out on a little terrace in one of the camps, and every morning shoots down 3 or 4 people. I invite you to watch the film and see what Mr. Schlinder told that individual in one of their parties. How to use authority. And that makes the distinct difference between authority and empowerment. The other issue about empowerment, on the other hand, it comes with accountability. You cannot expect to be empowered and not be accountable. I am empowering you to make estimates. I am empowering you to make your own plan. But now you've got to be accountable for your estimates, and you've got to be accountable for your own plan. And that's why we need the daily wash-ups. And the person with authority also has another obligation and the responsibility. Before you empower anybody, make sure that that person is empowerable. Because not everybody is empowerable. I take this opportunity to thank you all for being with us for the last 55 minutes. I hope you enjoyed it, and keep looking at quickfocus.com, and more webinars will effectively take place. I honestly ask you to look at quickfocus.com and watch out. And if you have any questions, you can use the email address which is being shown at the moment. Send us any questions or any recommendations to info@quickfocus.com. Thank you very much and have a good day.